Hello, everyone. On behalf of Understanding Ag and the Soil Health Academy, we want to welcome you to today's webinar, Resilience Through Crop Diversification with Brandon Bock. Few housekeeping items. Please enter your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. After Brandon's presentation, we will be answering those questions. With that, I'd like to introduce Brandon Bock. Brandon and his wife, Jessica, and their family farm near Berthold, North Dakota. In the summer of 2018, Brandon reached out and called me because he was interested in doing things a bit differently. And so he wanted to learn a bit more about regenerative agriculture. I encouraged him to attend one of our soil health academies. In January of 2019, Brandon and Jessica traveled down to Missouri and attended the Soil Health Academy we held at Ray Archuleta's. And what Brandon and Jessica have done with their operation since then is nothing short of fantastic. I keep in touch with Brandon often, and how he's advancing his ecosystem in the dry northern plains is a story that needed to be told. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon Bock.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining us, and I feel very blessed but yet humbled to be able to share our story. I'm just an average farmer that has been put in a position of change, and a lot of good people out there to help with that. So anyway, like Gabe said, we farm in north central North Dakota. This is my family, Lyle on the left, Jesse, me, and our daughter Grace. So little start to history of our farm. I grew up on the farm where we currently live. This is myself and then my brother Caleb. The picture on the right was a picture I found from an old 4-H project I did. And as you can see, we were conventional tillage. My mom and dad farmed about 1,500 acres and had about 65 head of beef cattle. But if you read the caption that I had on there, my son Lyle actually had to help me put the writing back on it. And we were taught that killing was as much of a part of farming as growing was. So we had a lot of things that we needed to change. So in 2001, I graduated high school, went to diesel mechanics college, got my degree there, and then came back and started doing custom work and farming. I didn't have very much land to farm, and my dad didn't have enough to really let me into the operation. So it was mostly custom work for the first few years. So anyway, in the first several years up until 2019, then we got to the point where we were minimum till / direct seed. We kept using more and more synthetic fertilizer. Got to the point where it was even multiple passes, some with the sprayer, multiple passes of fungicide a year, insecticide, herbicides. We were at the point to where on a spring wheat crop, we were making 6 passes with the sprayer. It was just completely out of line. Huge bank operating loans, hiring agronomists to tell us what to do and when to do it, using all the latest and greatest chemicals, building more infrastructure to handle the more yield. We had big bushels and big bills, and we thought we were being progressive. So this was kind of the start of it, direct seeding. We thought that no-till was going to be the answer. We were putting high rates of nitrogen down with anhydrous. Then we slowly moved to, thought we'd go to a disc drill, thought that would help out. But as you can see in the middle picture, disc drill wasn't the answer either. We started fighting a lot of residue problems. Our residue wouldn't break down very quickly. And hair pitting was a huge problem. And look at, I mean, you can see the dirt blowing behind it. And then whenever we got the chance, we would fight nature. Most of these were in 2014, I want to say. And you can see the upper right picture, we had to run on top of the frost even to get the ground broke open. It was so wet after all the prevent plant years of 09, 11, 13. And we had no life in our fields during those prevent plant years. Actually, the sprayer picture was a neighbor, and I should have never been out in that field, but anyway. So we made a mess out of a lot of our land in that process of that. So the upper left picture is, that's the type of land we farm on average. It's either way too wet or too dang dry. And we've never been able to figure out the balance and how to manage that moisture. And we're getting a lot closer. So the right picture there, we just had so much straw raising some of them good cereal crops that we thought we'd have to try to do some sort of light incorporation, which was just a nightmare trying to seed into that with a distro. And plus, obviously, it didn't break down as quickly as it should have when we decided we needed to kill all of our microbes in the soil. This is more soil erosion, just while we're seeding. This was probably not even a tilled situation. So spring of 2018 was a complete nightmare with dirt blowing in our area. It was dry in the fall of 17, and we went out in the spring and we had done some light tillage here and there, and we watched the entire countryside blow away. It was just a disaster. I don't have any pictures of it because obviously I wasn't very proud of it. And I had a long discussion with my one landlord, and he was really upset, and I just swore I would never put myself in that situation again. This is a little video. This is not in the spring of 18. I don't remember what year this was, but just kind of shows some of the dirt blowing behind the disc drill even. And the song just happened to be kind of fitting that was on the radio that day, because we'd all love to have heaven be a place on earth. We're going to hopefully get there someday. And a few more videos of just soil blowing. Even though we thought we were doing better with no-till, we weren't even close. In this last video, Gabe's going to scold me because this was even after I went down to Missouri. But I had already cultivated this field in the fall of 18 because it was so rough from all the sprayer passes we did when it was too darn wet to be out there. So I'd cultivated, and it was so rough from the chisel plow, we had to do something to smooth it out. But this is absolutely awful.
Smoothing the field out. Hopefully this is not the last times that I have to do this much tillage. Not good.
So that was kind of when we first started opening our eyes up a little bit there. So we're fortunate enough to have really great neighbors in the area. Back in the years when we were trying to push the envelope on yield, we had a lot of money invested in the crop. We would all try to work together as much as possible to get the crop off timely, which makes for a lot of logistical issues. And but anyway, it's still kind of fun to get together with neighbors. I just thought these were some pretty cool pictures of working together. So all the time, like I say, up until about 18, it was always about more fertilizer, more chemical, more fungicide, more insecticide, build more bins, more buildings, buy more machinery, hire more help. And all the way along, it was less time for the family. Obviously lost some faith in God too along the way, because we weren't relying on him to help us as much as we should have been. And we were losing the connection to the land. When we were hiring agronomists to go out and scout all of our fields, I used to brag about not having to go scout fields. And it's terrible. You miss out on a lot of opportunity to learn and really understand what's going on in your fields. So Gabe told me not that long ago that the health of your soil is directly related to the number of footsteps put in it, and I'm starting to see that. So this is some old farming pictures, just with the family getting involved and having the kids growing up with us. Very rewarding way of life, so we want to do everything we can to leave it in better shape to them. Okay, so why change? You know, I guess I asked myself a lot of that. Basically, we noticed the saline areas on headlands and low areas were getting bigger over time. We couldn't spray our way out of a weed problem, even though we tried. Water infiltration rates were terrible, to say the least. In the fall of 2017, we had basically a drought the second half of the year. We were bone dry. You could have lost a crescent wrench down in the cracks, and we got 1 2-inch rainfall event, and we had water sitting in sloughs. So I just looked at that and knew there was a problem with that. We were working harder, spending more for the same net revenue. All the way along, we were wearing our equipment out, which that stuff doesn't get any cheaper. Like I say, we're never done chasing more of everything. Work environment was chemically toxic to the family and all of our employees. Like I said, in 2018, we had the worst wind erosion event that I can even remember, even back to being a kid. And that was all after we had switched to no-till. Operating loans only got bigger. There's more demand for higher labor, less time for family. Just had a feeling that something wasn't right with the current direction we were headed. And last but not least, it was God's grace. Which leads us to these guys. Just kind of stumbled upon regenerative agriculture through a YouTube video. I saw somebody, and I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Russell Hedrick, I don't know, but it was somebody over southeastern part of the country that was planting into about 6 to 7 foot tall cereal rye. And I just remember looking at the picture and being like, what are these guys thinking? So curiosity got me, and I watched the video, and then that just spurred more desire to learn. So I kept watching more videos and ended up watching one of Gabe's videos, and he had his phone number in there. So I just wrote it down, and actually one day ended up just picking up the phone and calling him. And to my surprise, he picked up the phone and visited with me like I was one of his neighbors. Just a really nice conversation, and ended up getting a little bit of cover crop seed from him that fall and planted a little oats and radishes. It was way too late in the year to be doing it, but I mean, it was still a start, and I only did it on a few acres. But so Gabe encouraged me to head down to Bismarck that fall, in the fall of 2018, to the Soil Health Summit. So that was a 2-day conference, and myself and 2 other neighbors, Marlo Stromberg and another friend of mine, Wade Rodemaker, we drove down there for the 2-day conference, and it was really rewarding. So actually we ran into Gabe down there, and he encouraged us to go down to Missouri then. And actually Marlo Stromberg and Kelly, his wife, and then Jesse and I, we ended up driving down to Missouri to raise Archuleta's farm in January. And that was another rewarding experience. So, and like Gabe said, when we were down there in Missouri, I know it comes from Don Campbell, but really stuck with me, and it's really changed the way I look at everything on our farm. If you want to make small changes, change the way you do things. If you want to make major changes, change the way you see things. And honestly, guys, that's all of it. It's, you can go out in the field and you might find something wrong or find a problem, but there's so much that's functioning properly. You just have to look for it. And we were never taught to look for the good things. We were always taught, hey, there's one weed, go and spray the whole field. Well, we didn't know the harm we were doing. So anyway, just change the way you see things, and there's a lot of good things that'll happen from just that. And after we got back from Missouri, I saw this, or I heard it or / read it 3 different times within about a month. And anyway, so come to me, all of you who labor and are heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Really stuck with me. We were working way too hard at trying to make money, and we don't have to work that hard. So anyway, that led me to really kind of start analyzing where we were, and our balance was just completely out of whack. You know, I think that's a really important part of everybody's life, whether you're a farmer or whatever. You have to find your balance, and you know, you can put whatever words in here you want, but if your balance is off, you're never going to be happy. And that's where I just knew that my desire for money or more of something else had thrown everything out of whack. And we're getting a lot closer to being balanced out now. So I just encourage everybody to try to find their balance, which led me to my mirror check. And this wasn't as easy to do as one might think. I had to realize I was part of the problem and not the solution. It isn't anyone's fault but our own. I mean, we can sit here and try to blame agronomists, the entire agronomy industry, blame whoever you want for the current situation you're in. And at the end of the day, we make our own decisions. We have to take responsibility for our actions. So basically, who do you want looking back at the mirror? I certainly want to have integrity when I look at myself. So where we are currently, major reduction in synthetic fertilizer through the Haney test. Right now, currently on year 3, we're at about a 50 to 80% reduction, depending on the field and the crop. From day 1, we eliminated fungicides and insecticides besides corn or sunflower seed treat, which we're working on that. This year, I did find some sunflower seed without seed treat, but that's not as easy as you would think. So hopefully we can keep pushing these seed companies to make that more available. We started spot spraying herbicides wherever possible. In the past, we would blanket spray everything and just go as fast as you can with the sprayer, try to cover as many acres as you can, and just do what we were told. And I mean, I left the field a lot of times wondering why I did that. And now I'll take and run around and spot spray quite often. And there's a lot of times you can leave a half section of land and be like, hey, I just saved $3,000 on herbicides. Plus I didn't expose soil that didn't need any weeds killed to the herbicides. So overall, we're at about a 50% reduction in total herbicide use by year 3. We try to keep our crop stubble as tall as we possibly can. We ended up buying shellborne stripper headers for our cereal crops, which has been just an amazing benefit to our farm in more than one way, and we'll get to that later. We no longer hire agronomists to scout our fields. I do all of that myself. A lot of times Lyle rides with me on the motorcycle. So we're spending more family time together. It's actually really enjoyable because honestly, there was a lot of things that I don't know. I don't know about a lot of weeds. I don't know about anything going on in our fields, really. I hired that done my entire career. So it's been an educational process for myself as much as it is Lyle. He's growing up not even knowing the difference, which is great. We stay out of the fields and they're too wet now. We always used to push the envelope and think we had to get things done as timely as possible at all costs. And we just made a mess like you saw in the earlier slides. This is major reduction in compaction in our fields now. We've gone to 100% zero tillage, unless there's just like a random tire rut to smooth out here or there. We built a Johnson Sioux compost bin, and we use that as seed treatment now for our small grains. We seed cover crops wherever and whenever possible. Try to get them in as timely as possible, because that's very important. The living roots in the soil is the key. It's amazing how quickly our soils will go backwards without that living root. I can see it even year to year. Just if we don't have a cash crop that allows a cover crop, the soils are not the same. We've increased crop diversity, both our cash crops and our cover crops. We used to seed roughly 3 cash crops. Now we're up to, I try to do at least 6, and then cover crops, on top of that for diversity. And then Jessie, she planted herself a no-till garden, and has started to make sourdough bread for the family. She makes salsa, homemade spaghetti sauce, does all that stuff. So that's really rewarding, eating better food too. So this is a Johnson Sioux bioreactor we built. Easy, cheap way to boost your microbes in your soil. Just take some time to go gather up the high carbon residue and keep it moist. That's all there is to it. It's really not complicated at all. Like I said, we've eliminated chemical seed treat on all of our small grains, and we're working on our row crop seed. So this is just kind of the process of what we do. This compost pile is not mature, but when we brew our tea, we would take mature compost, put roughly 3 pounds in that compost tea bag, and then we aerate it for 18 to 24 hours and just keep an eye on the oxygen levels in it, make sure it doesn't go anaerobic. And then we just gravity flow feed it either into the conveyor or the auger when we're putting it on the seed. It just works great. And we've had it to the point where we've had water running out of the semi-trailer, or compost tea running out of the semi-trailer, and it still meters great in the air seeder by the time you get it transferred. We bought Shelbourne stripper headers. We get a lot longer lasting residue out of them. Initially, you'll have a little bit more bare soil under the canopy on year 1, but going forward, that very quickly fixes itself over the next couple of years. This all provides shade and wind protection. It's amazing how much less fuel we burn during harvest. It's absolutely crazy. We burn 1/3 of the fuel combining that we used to, and you can run 50 to 75% faster ground speed. So anyway, it's allowed us to go from basically running 2 combines. We combine all of our acres with 1 combine now. And in saying this, though, we have such variable weather that it's a must to incorporate cover crops. Otherwise, we're going to be too wet some years, and then you're going to fight prevent plant, so we don't want that either. So that's where we've really tried to push getting something growing underneath that canopy. And especially, I really like putting overwintering crops on this ground, like rye or winter wheat. So that way you don't even have to worry about seeding it the next year. Or if you do want to seed it, say to a sunflower or something, a later season crop, that rye will be a foot tall. It'll have used enough moisture. So here's just pictures that's stripped off flax stubble in the upper left. And then to the right of that is winter wheat seeded into that stripped off flax. And I mean, just look at the awesome shade and wind protection and snow holding capability, all that. I really like winter wheat seeded on stripped off flax ground. It's just works really well. And that flax will still be standing when you go harvest the winter wheat the next year. It's just really good. Lower left is when we were combining rye, cereal rye. There's just a pile of carbon left over there. And then the picture to the right there that's barley and radishes. And I'm pretty sure we had yellow peas in with that too, growing in a stripped off winter wheat field as a cover crop. I've gone to seeding most of my fall cover crops, if we're not going to take them to harvest the next year, in 15-inch rows with the disc drill. It just allows more stubble to stand, and also cheapens up our seeding costs. We're just wearing out half of our disc openers instead of all of them. And I really prefer seeding them because we just get really good luck getting them established with a disc drill. I'd like to figure out a way to cheapen that up, but so far it's just worked really well. Once again, tall stubble is the key for easy seeding. Anytime you can keep that residue up in the air, you can just seed into it with a planter or the disc drill much easier. So we try to cut our sunflowers really high. I run an old school John Deere corn head that just has regular old fluted rolls. So all it does is pull the ears off and most of the stalks stand back up. And then we'll just go into them corn stalks probably next year with sunflowers and plant right between the rows. So, and wildlife, it's amazing how much wildlife we see in these fields with this tall residue. We sold the harrow. I did end up buying a fertilizer spreader just because my disc drill isn't set up for fertilizing, and plus we're so variable on our moisture that I do spread urea as my nitrogen source when we need it, and only when we need it. And also that fertilizer spreader has a granny bin on the back, so we can broadcast like a red clover, crimson clover, something like that mid-season in our spring wheat or barley or whatever. And then picture on the right, I don't have very many pictures of spraying. Obviously, I don't enjoy it that much. But this is just one picture of me spraying off some, this is rye that I had in for cover crop where we put sunflowers in this. This last spring, the rye didn't get very tall because we were so dry. But you can see my field there compared to the neighbor soybean field. And it's pretty crazy how much of his water I get. So we bought an older Jeep and set that up for soil testing. And there again, it's really cheap. I bought a surplus hydraulic cylinder online, and then I found a cheap electric over hydraulic 12-volt power pack, and I basically built the whole setup. I just had to buy the probes is all I bought. But anyway, Jesse and Grace do most all the soil testing. And anyway, so we've added a lot of plant diversity. 2020, well, the fall of 19, we've had a lot of curveballs thrown our direction with weather since we went down this regenerative path. So like I said, I went down to Missouri in the early spring of 19. The summer of 19 was dry. We basically had a drought all the way up until September, about halfway through harvest, and then we had 30 inches of rain in a month. We had a fair amount of our spring wheat we couldn't even get into to get harvested that fall. And so then the following spring, we struggled getting some of the acres seeded, and especially the land that we didn't get harvested the fall before, or land that didn't have a cover crop on it. Anything we had a cover crop on, we were able to get seeded. So that was a sign right off the bat we were headed in the right direction. So the picture on the left was 13 species cover crop blend that we seeded on some of that prevent plant then the following year in 2020, like midsummer. We couldn't get it seeded until it was the very end of July. It was just wet up until that point. And anyway, we did finally get it seeded, and I did seed that in 15-inch rows also. But it's amazing. Look at the diversity out there and how quickly it canopied those 15-inch rows. So that was really fun watching that cover crop grow that summer. We're really trying hard I added corn to the rotation just because we didn't have any other crop to get a warm season grass on our land. we're almost too far north for corn, but I guess so far so good. We'll hopefully keep raising that because we have to, I really feel like we have to raise all 4 plant groups, you know, the warm season, cool season grasses, and warm and cool season broadleafs. This is soybeans growing into that stripped off rye, and the year before the rye was spring wheat. So there's 2 years of cereals before this, and as you can see, you can almost see zero soil in that picture. That's all good and bad. We're learning that with soybeans, basically as we learn about how our microbes are starting to function, we kind of hit our carbon nitrogen ratio out of whack here, and the beans kind of struggled throughout the year. They were pretty yellow, and I think they could have probably used a little boost of nitrogen maybe to get them on, get a start to them. But there again, it was so dry this year again that our nodulation didn't function like it should have. So maybe in a normal year with normal rainfall, we would have been fine. It's hard to say, but anyway, you're not going to see any soil blow. So this goes back to the previous far left picture. That's the 13 species mix we seeded, and then that was right after planting them. And then this was towards fall, kind of probably right before freeze up. That's what it turned into. And actually, if you look at, so this picture on the far right, that's what it looked like in the fall right before freeze up. And if you look at, I'll go back a slide, this cornfield where Lyle's standing, that's that field. And you can see how quickly all of our residue cycled once we get life back into the soils. I mean, there's not near enough cover on that ground, even after growing that. So like I said, go back to 2019, fall of 19 was really wet. And this is some of our prevent plant that we had in the far left picture. In 19, I cut back on our herbicides quite a bit. And therefore we had a little bit of prickly lettuce that got through, which a lot of people would say is really bad. Honestly, it turned out to be a blessing, because look at the beautiful crop of prickly lettuce I had growing on my prevent plant ground using moisture. So as long as we sprayed that off before it went to seed, talk about a blessing. And every plant you'd pull out, there was earthworms around the roots. Where in the past, I would have never allowed a field to look like that. And now, to me, that was absolutely awesome to have something growing out there. Middle picture is a stripped off winter wheat field that we seeded barley and radishes and peas in right after harvest. And look at how big that barley got before freeze up. It headed out. So it's amazing how much we can grow in a year if we can get our crop harvested early and get a cover crop seeded timely. I mean, the amount of carbon capture there is unreal. Where in the past, I would have had to do 2 passes of Roundup just to keep that field sprayed, because I mean, that's what we thought we had to do. The picture on the right is, that's right after a frost, but that's a bunch of oats cover crop on field peas. And it's just amazing how good a ground cover we can get, where normally on pea stubble, that would have been almost bare. So this was that 13 species cover crop. We seeded winter wheat on most all of that in the fall of 2020, and we just green seeded it. We went right into it, and it actually worked out really well. We ended up once again being pretty dry in 2020, so part of the winter wheat worked out pretty decent. Some of it I actually ended up planting corn on, just to, we had a little bit uneven stands. But the crazy part is anywhere where the cover crop the previous year was really good, we had the best winter wheat stands. Wherever we had thinner cover crop stands, the winter wheat didn't do as well. So once again, the tall stubble and the little snow catches is kind of a saving grace. The picture on the right was planting soybeans into stripped off rye stubble, and what you can see is all volunteer rye that we had sprayed off. probably 2 weeks before we planted it. And you can see here, it was about 85 degrees this day with about a 35-mile-an-hour wind. And you can see the land roller up there. Normally in the past, I wouldn't have dared run the land roller right behind the planter because it would have blown away. It would have crumbled that topsoil, where now we've got such a mat of straw out there that we can roll right behind the planter and not have to worry about it. So here's a couple more videos. And this was the first year of planting. This would be the fall of 19, planting cover crop right while we were seeding peas. Oops.
So there's Lyle combining and seed cover crop. This is the fun one.
So anyway, that was pretty exciting. I think the whole neighborhood thought we were completely crazy seeding in the same field while we were combining. But anyway, it's good. At least they're talking about us. And then this was the fall of 2020 also, combining peas back home. And this was when we had so many seagulls around, and Understanding Ag did a story on us basically when honestly, I just felt the good Lord sent these seagulls to help take care of our grasshopper problem that year. And anyway, it puts it into reality when you see how many seagulls are out in this field.
Look at all these seagulls. Incredible.
Anyway, it just goes to show that everything in nature needs a food source. And I mean, us farmers, we really affect that in a lot of ways through spraying insecticides. I mean, at the end of the day, these peas weren't terrible, and I don't know, them seagulls weren't hurting a darn thing. So we go back. Now, this was what we used to do on the left and where we're at today on the right. And this wasn't that long ago, 2018 sunflower crop. This was actually my dad's field. I didn't have any sunflowers in that year. But if you look down underneath that green foxtail, you can see the ground was pretty black under there. And I had already sprayed one pass of clethodim on this. And this is the second flush that came in again. It was unbelievable how much we fought weeds. So fast forward to 2021, this is my sunflowers seeded into winter wheat stubble, stripped off stubble. And you can also see, if you look into there, the barley that headed out the fall before and froze off. It's just amazing how clean that field stayed all year. And we ran around and spot sprayed clethodim is all. I did go and spray a little bit of Express on some thistle areas, but it's just unreal how clean your fields will stay when you can armor them. So the benefits to it, increased faith in knowing we need God's guidance. I mean, that's number one. We've really had to fall back on that. Life is coming back to our land faster than we could have ever imagined, whether it's insects, wildlife, biology. It's just amazing. So we've got far less weed pressure than before. And I feel the insects are a big help with this. We've got there's a lot of seed-eating insects out there if you just leave them alone. I mean, but we were killing them every year. And when you don't till your land, all them seeds are laying right on top just for them insects to eat. Major reduction in fertilizer and chemical, like I said, 50 to 80%. Roughly 40% reduction in fuel usage. Far less hours on our equipment. We've got a more balanced workload by having more crops in the rotation. Better water infiltration, less wind erosion, much less stress. Continued profitability has been a nice bonus. Rewarding to see some neighbors starting to take steps in the right direction. And we're finally getting asked some questions on it, which is kind of nice. So here you can see our soils. upper left picture is our soil on the top and a neighbor's soil next to it. And you can just see the difference. We've got earthworms all over the place, and baby earthworms, earthworm populations are just absolutely exploding. It's absolutely unreal. But yeah, you can see the soil structure, the earthworm pores in the soil. They're just everywhere. And this is some pea roots I was just trying to wash the soil off of. Once you get good soil aggregation, you can't even hardly wash the soil off the roots. As you can see on the left, this was early on, rye roots, wheat roots. You can see where the soil's not sticking to the roots. We had very poor rhizosheaths. And as look to the right here, you can start to see improved rhizosheaths starting to develop as our soils are getting healthier. So this was the first cover crop I seeded on that pea ground in the fall of 19 to the left there. So you can, as you can see there, there's a pea, oats and radishes all growing together. The next picture is volunteer spring wheat and crimson clover after harvest, because I had seeded some crimson clover with that spring wheat crop. So we didn't even seed that to a cover crop because we already had one growing for free. Once again, that's Lyle standing in that first fall of 2019 cover crop with 30 inches of rain in 1 month. That's what you get. It was absolutely beautiful. And then on the right there, that was rye and peas and radishes seeded into spring wheat. So this was, I think this was that first year's fall of 2019 cover crop. Just the nice even snow catch and how nice it melts when that residue absorbs the sunlight. The next picture is, that's our stripped off wheat stubble. And then in the background there, you can see a neighbor's pea field that didn't have any cover crop or anything on it. So this was getting closer to spring, and you can see how much faster the snow melted out of our stripped off wheat stubble, because it had all the stubble sticking through it to absorb the sunlight. So it was pretty amazing to see how quickly the snow disappeared that first year. This is just the other day, I drove up the road to the north, and as you can see, my dad had sunflowers to the west in the top picture, and you can see there's almost no snow blowing and the ditches are almost empty. And then like 2.5 miles further north is my soybean field on the left and my cornfield on the right. And like I say, at virtually exact same time frame. So basically it sums it up. I'm ready to quit raising soybeans because it's such a mess. This is more fungal activity starting to take hold on our land. You can see our residues breaking down quicker. It's amazing, after rains, we start to even see moss growing on top of the soil now. So it's just obviously when we've quit spraying the fungicides, that's really helped us out. And you can see the seeds growing in the upper right and lower right. That Johnson soup tea treat, we get a lot of fungal activity around our root zones, but it doesn't seem to hurt anything. I mean, I obviously don't know what's going on there. It's way more complicated than I can imagine. But at one point I thought it might be bad, but I don't know. It doesn't seem to be, because we're still raising decent crops. Our insects have started to come back. Every time we look around, we're seeing more beneficial insects, more ground-dwelling bees, seed-eating beetles, predatory wasps. I don't know, this lower picture with all them worms on that weed plant, I don't even know what they are, but they were eating a weed plant, so I'm assuming they're good. So this is Lyle and I out scouting fields. It's just really enjoyable spending time together. And like I say, you find all kinds of things out in these fields, whether it's bird nests, little birds. The picture on the far right, I just thought this was really eye-opening. We were cleaning up some old scrap iron and whatnot behind the farm, and that area was a field up until about 12 years ago, And then we started kind of we fenced in an area and started parking old equipment back there and some spare parts. We were cleaning stuff up, and I found that blue nozzle body there was kind of buried under the grass and roots. So in about 12 years, I figure that grass area produced roughly 3 to 4 inches of topsoil, which is flat amazing to me. What can happen if you leave this ground alone? So that leads us to basically all the fun we get to have now. I mean, we had fun before, but we have more time for it, and it's more enjoyable because you're not as stressed thinking you have to get back to go spray fungicide or whatever. I mean, we enjoy our lake time a lot more now. We get to go snowmobiling, we enjoy hunting. So family time is very important. We have to take time for it. So some of the struggles, getting a cold shoulder from some of the people in the conventional ag industry, that hasn't always been easy. You have to have a pretty thick skin. Finding seed that isn't treated with seed treat. Sometimes it's hard to engage in conversation with farmers that are just conventional farmers still, that don't have any desire to change or don't even want to listen to any ideas of change. And there again, teaching others is somewhat challenging if they don't want to change. Finding chemicals that aren't combined with something else you don't need. Just an example of that, I needed some Axial XL just to spray some wild oats out of some barley that I was raising for seed. And I went to go pick some up in the agronomy center. All they had was Axial Star, which has starine in it also. And I just said I didn't want that. And they're like, well, it's the same price, just buy that. And I said, well, no, but I don't need starine. And anyway, it was just kind of a pain to get what I wanted. But I mean, we did end up getting it. It's just, you have to ask for it. Convincing landowners that a few weeds aren't a problem. That's a little bit of an issue because everybody's so used to seeing all these fields picture perfect. But I tell you what, they get over that in a hurry when you give them a land rent bonus check when you have a good year, when things are working out. Finding better markets for our healthier grains, that's somewhat of a struggle for the time being, and hopefully we can keep pursuing better markets there. Having to question everything, that's kind of a struggle because honestly, you never know what's right anymore. So there's just a lot of time spent in research, whether you should or shouldn't do something, and total reprogramming of our old brain. There's a lot of times it's easy to think that you should just do what you used to do, and it takes time to really train yourself. But every year that goes by, that gets easier. And this is a struggle too. This is all from 2020 to 2021, and neighbors' fields or people's fields that I drove by. This is unbelievable that this is acceptable in our day and age. I thought this quote was really good. The farmer is a poor creature who skins the land and leaves it worthless to his children. The farmer is a good farmer who, having enabled the land to support himself and to provide for the education of his children, leaves it to them a little better than he found it himself. So where are we going? Complete elimination of seed treatments, complete elimination of synthetic fertilizers, continue reducing herbicides where possible. You know, maybe someday complete elimination. It's just really hard where we're at with as short of a growing season as we have to think that we can raise cover crops, especially overwintering cover crops, without having a way to chemically kill them for our cash crop. I don't know. It's just, we struggle with where we grow, or where we're at here anyway. Row crop interseeding of cover crops, possible relay cropping, companion cropping, possibly. Market development for our healthier grains, more time educating others of the benefits, and continued trust in God's guidance. So this is the cover crop interseeder that I'm building for row crops currently. It's going to get painted here real shortly, but all it is an old John Deere 12-row cultivator bar and a 430 bushel tank that we tore the front end off and then built a gooseneck hitch and put some parallel linkage off of a fast liquid fertilizer applicator. So anyway, we're just in the process of getting that built. So we'll be able to possibly fertilize with it if we see fit mid-season in corn or / seed cover crops, or I should say corn and sunflowers. So, and then we can adjust our fertility decisions based on weather conditions a little better. And that leads me to, like I say, possible soybean, wheat relay cropping, or companion cropping, or / I'm certain we'll get the inner seeding done probably sooner than anything, which is the lower left there. Hopefully get an understory growth in our corn and sunflowers. And then obviously our market development, it'd be nice to get some more markets. So I'll close with that, and like to leave my phone number and email there. If anybody ever wants to get a hold of me, feel free. Just please leave a message if I don't answer, because there is a lot of times if I'm working in the shop, I have earplugs in and can't always hear my phone ring. So just please leave a message and I will call you back. So thank you everybody for joining us.
All right. Thank you, Brandon. I just want to remind everyone of upcoming webinars before we get into questions here. We're going to have another one, cover crops with cash crops, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It'll be an open forum discussion with 4 Midwest farmers on February 17th at 7 p.m. Central Time. And then we're going to continue with the Biblical Stewardship series with Dr. Alan Williams and Sam Bass. Watch for that coming up. Brandon, before we get into questions, perhaps I don't think we covered the precipitation, and I know you've had wide swings in precipitation, but what is quote unquote average for your farm?
I want to say average is roughly 18 inches.
So
18 and a half.
All right. So you're in a 18-inch moisture environment. And then your growing season, when do you normally, when normally is last frost?
Well, normally last frost. I mean, it used to be it was around the middle of September. Lately here, it's been closer to the beginning of October. Mm-hmm. But anyway, needless to say, it's relatively short growing season. So we have to be on getting our cover crops seeded timely. And it's amazing how even like 2 to 3 days makes a huge difference in plant growth.
Yep. Very good. So we're getting a number of questions coming in. There's several that are in regards to the Johnson Sioux. What are you using for your composting ingredients? And then what benefits do you see from inoculating the seed?
So honestly, I'm not real high tech into that. All I really do is I more or less grind up oats in a stone mill, and we just mix that in with our basically 3 pounds of compost and put it in there and just let it brew. It's not very scientific. I am not real high tech with it. The main thing I've seen is it's just amazing the root mass we're getting out of these small seedlings by doing it. And like I said, like I showed you in them slides, we're just seeing fungal growth all over in our fields. I don't think any one of us can really pinpoint what's there. All we know is it all came from natural sources. So that's where I really don't want to add a bunch of other stuff, whether it's fish oils or any of this stuff that's not natural to our land.
Mm-hmm. And then for the compost itself, what raw materials are you using?
Basically just the initial compost bin that we built. We went and got some native soil from some pasture that's never been disturbed. We put a little bit of that in there, probably a couple 5-gallon pails. Otherwise, all it is crop residue from our fields, whether it's wheat straw, corn stalk, sunflower stalks, pea residue, nothing fancy, grass clippings. We get our old church missalettes, and the kids shred all the paper from that. So we put shredded paper in there. Just try to reuse whatever we can.
Great. And then you are keeping that in a heated building during the winter, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that sits in our heated shop in the winter, and then I put it outside in the summer.
Good. Here's next question. What observations do you feel are most important to your regenerative progress?
Living roots, hands down. Living roots and elimination of fungicides and insecticides. The living root, though, it's amazing how you can, like this year I had corn in. Well, I wasn't set up to interseed yet, so I had a monocrop corn cash crop. And you go dig out in them fields versus where I had, say, spring wheat that we went and seeded rye on this fall, rye and peas and clover. It's not even a comparison how much better shape that land is in where that rye and peas and clover are growing right now. You can't even compare the two.
Good. Aaron has a question. He says, Brandon, we are close to the same age. It sounds like you farm with your father, as do I. It sounds like he is pretty on board with the direction you are headed. Is there any advice you can give on getting your older business partners, AKA father, to see the possibility of this type of mindset?
So family dynamics are tough there. And my dad and I operate out of the same yard, but operate separately. So no, dad's not necessarily on board with what I'm doing. He doesn't do any of this on his land. Some of the pictures I shared were his fields. Like I say, just as far as the tall sunflower stalks and whatnot, and where he had sunflowers in 2018. But no, he's not currently doing these practices. So I really can't help you out there. It's tough. I mean, you just got to kind of try to lead by example and go from there.
Very good. Question from Donald. How is your water infiltration today versus 3 years ago?
I should have done testing when we first started this, and I didn't. I'm not very good at record keeping. It's just we have a lot of work to do for the acres we farm. And more or less, I just really try to concentrate on getting the job done. I know for a fact they're better because I can drive around after a rainfall event and compare my fields to neighbors' fields, and they'll have water sitting around and I won't. So they're improving. There's no doubt about it. It's to quantitate it to inches per hour. I can't say that, but there's no doubt that they're better.
Well, judging from the aggregation of the soil in some of those pictures, I guarantee you infiltration rates are going to be outstanding. So Charles, as a comment/question, and you and I just happened to talk about this the other day, Brandon. He said, large equipment, lots of land. Can farmers get by on smaller acreage?
Absolutely. It's not even a question. It's, you don't have to have large equipment to make money. Honestly, if you can run some smaller equipment's way cheaper. It's way lighter. It's way easier on your soil. And no, you can definitely, there again, there's a lot of things with running smaller, or just say even a little bit older equipment. You got to be a decent mechanic too, which has helped me out over the years. But no, you can certainly get by on less acres. I mean, I've been fortunate enough over all those years that I was able to rent quite a bit of ground. We farm about 4,800 acres currently. But that being said, I would not be opposed to farming less if a lot of my landlords decided that they didn't want me to farm it. But thankfully, I've got really, really good landlords. And there again, I feel a lot of, I'm just going to keep farming their land because they've stuck with me through a lot of hard times too.
Yeah, talking about that, Brandon, you had mentioned a land rent bonus to your landlords. Would you explain that, please?
There once again, I'm very fortunate. I have very manageable rents. Not everybody has that. Once again, we get back to context. My landlords are very fair. They always have been. And there again, when I went down this journey, I didn't know what to expect out of it. Like I told them, I said, there may be I may make less money. Who knows? And I remember the one landlord said, heck, you might make more. You never know. And honestly, he passed away here just right before Christmas, that landlord. And he was young. He was only 63 years old. But anyway, he didn't even get a chance to see his bonus rent check, but his wife did. So anyway, yeah, it was a blessing to be in a position to be able to do that. And there's a lot of things that went into that. I mean, obviously we have good commodity markets right now too. That helped. I was able to find some good markets for some other crops. And so there's a lot of things that go into context, and just because one thing works for me doesn't necessarily mean it'll work for everybody.
But Brandon, you were in a D3 drought in 2021, correct?
Yeah, we were, but there's a lot of things that still worked. I mean, it's like I say, there's a lot of things that go into it. And I had some grain in the bin from previous years, so that helped out the marketing situation too. But anyway.
Yeah, you're pretty modest. So Donald has a question for the whole group. So I'll start with Brandon, and then I'm going to go around to some of the panelists. The question is, what has been the most effective way for regenerative farmers to convince their neighbors to also use this type of management?
I would say plant the seed and let it grow. You have to be very careful you don't push people away. It's amazing the conversations that I used to get into and kind of came into them hot and heavy, and all you do is you just put up a wall, and we can't do that. We have to just plant the seed and let them watch and answer questions when they're asked. That's all we can do.
Very good. David Kleinschmidt.
Man, it's hard to deny that answer right there, because that's basically it. I mean, you can, we can plant seeds and Mother Nature rains too much and we have to, replant. So think about that. If you plant that seed into somebody's mind and you just keep hammering on it, you overwatered it and now it's dead. So I always think about the parable of the sower in the Bible, and some's going to fall on good ground and sprout and just, and take off. Some's going to fall on some shallow soils that's going to sprout for a little while and fall off. That's the big thing, is just mention it to them, but let them draw their own observations and conclusions. They'll see you succeed. They might see you fail a couple years in it too. But more times than not, if they see a success, they'll stick with, they'll come around.
Very good. Kent Solberg, I have to come to you. You've been a teacher in the past, and you still are through your work with UA. I'd like your ideas.
Yeah, I think Brandon hit it spot on. You got to plant the seed, but I'd take it a couple steps further. I'd put it out on the intersection of those two busy county roads that you farm next to, so everybody can see it. When people see and they're curious and they come to us and start asking questions, then you have an audience that wants to learn something, and they have to want to learn. And just keep doing what you're doing, and don't be afraid to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And but if they see what you're doing and like what they see, and continue to see others doing it, whether it's through the ag press or field days or whatever, there are going to be people who come around, and those are the people we want to invest in, because they're ready to make that change. They're ready to learn.
Thank you, Kent. Brandon, here's a question, and you by no means have to answer it, but it was asked, so I'm going to ask it of you. What is your break-even profitability for your acreage?
So I'm going to put it this way, is we were profitable before we switched to regenerative production, and we're still profitable now. To say that we're any more profitable, I don't keep track of all that, honestly. All my expenses get lumped together, and honestly, I don't care to get into a lot of. I mean, we'd have to get into land rents and family living and costs and all that. I mean, that's gets a little bit personal there, but all I can say is we're still profitable. And even, you know, the first 2 years we went down this road, we were profitable both of those years, and we didn't have good commodity prices then.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Question from Brian. Brandon, do you have or plan to integrate any livestock?
You know, our area is pretty tough with livestock. We farm right next to an upper wildlife refuge, so they pretty much took all the river bottom and hilly pasture land. And our groundwater is pretty poor also as far as wells. Like on our farm here, mom and dad had to use 4 wells to water 60 cows at one point, and we had to really be careful with water usage in the houses. That being said, there's not any fence around any of my rented land. There's no water on this rented land. I mean, as much as I'd like to think that we should and could, it's really hard to convince landowners to put up fence and drill wells. And then there's no electricity to buy a lot of them either. So the logistical, it'd be a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. But fact of the matter is, you are healing your ecosystems without livestock. Now, yeah, would livestock absolutely take it to another level? Perhaps, but you're profitable and it's working.
And if you guys saw the amount of deer damage on a lot of my sunflowers this year, I already have livestock.
Well, EHD is probably headed your way.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. So Charles wants to know when you soil test, fall or spring?
Usually in the fall.
And
go ahead.
Excuse me. Perhaps he'd like to know which tests.
So anyway, no, we usually do it in the fall, you know, right after, somewhere after harvest when we're not quite so busy, and then try to do it, you know, after a rainfall event, just so it's not dry or whatever. But anyway, and then we've been just sending and getting the Haney test done. I guess we started going to Regen labs now. Mm-hmm. But anyway, yeah, that's all we've been doing here, and it's nothing scientific. We don't do grid sampling. We don't do any of that. It's just for a baseline. And honestly, this spring, I talked to Lance, and there was a quarter of land. He recommended me put 20 pounds of N down to raise 120 bushel corn. And I called Lance. I said, "You're out of your mind." And he goes, "Well, Brandon, let me ask you this." He said, "If you put down 20 units of N on that field and you raise 100 bushel corn, are you going to be upset?" I said, "No, I'm going to be doing backflips." So I did what he said. Honestly, we raised 110 bushel corn on that quarter in a drought.
And that would be Lance Gunderson, the owner of Regen Ag Lab. Yep. Very good. Donald has a question. Are you considering buying some of the land you are renting?
You know, at some point I'd like to. You know, obviously that all depends on the conditions. I mean, this land has gotten to the point to where it's getting somewhat out of reach. I mean, we still have to be able to afford it. And frankly, this land, unless we can figure out better marketing options and get paid a lot more for our grains, it's really hard to make it pay for itself. So, I mean, you got to have cash coming from somewhere else almost. So, I mean, I'd love to own more farmland. Currently, out of the 4,800 acres we farm, I own about 220 of it. So I'm at the mercy of a lot of people.
Okay. Josiah asked, have you or has anyone on the panel here explored perennial wheat as a crop?
I haven't explored that yet, but I've heard about it and hope to someday.
Shane New, you want to answer that question, please?
Yes, we have. In fact, we've got some growing right now, so we're curious to see how things work out this coming summer.
Yeah, as do I. Both Shane and I have some Salish Blue perennial wheat that we seeded this fall, so we'll see how that turns out. Well, that is all the questions that we have.
If I may ask one question to Brandon, Gabe.
Sure.
I was having a hard time Brandon, are you considering going to 7.5-inch spacing on your cover crops? I know you mentioned 15-inch spacing. I'm just curious, with that residue that was disappearing underneath that corn crop, are you considering that now?
You know, so that was on that prevent plant ground chain where we seeded that on the 15-inch rows. And honestly, the main reason I did that was to lighten up the air seeder, because we pulled all the discs and rock shafts and everything off to make it lighter because it was so wet. I mean, we had to get something growing out there. The rest of this stuff, honestly, I'm pretty happy with the 15-inch rows for, like, say, cereal rye after spring wheat crop. And like I say, the main reason for that is it leaves so much of our stripped off stubble standing. Otherwise, if we run with a 7.5-inch spacing where we seeded spring wheat with the 7.5-inch spacing, it just tramples so much down. And then therefore we just end up not having as good of wind protection and snow catch. So, I mean, there is a situation where a 7.5-inch is better, no doubt about it. Like, say on some of this pea ground, 7.5 is probably better just to get more of a canopy out there. But there's a lot of situations where the 15 actually works better, I feel, for leaving the residue stand.
That's a great comment for your context. I guess my follow-up question would be, are you doubling up your seeding rates with that 15-inch spacing? Or what kind of seeding rates are you running compared to normal?
So, you know, no, we're not changing our seed rate per acre. So there would be double the seed in that 15-inch row of a 7.5-inch. But as far as a seed rate per acre, it's the same.
Thank you.
One more question here, Brandon. You mentioned in your presentation that you were broadcasting some clover into wheat. How has that worked for you?
You know, honestly, I haven't broadcast any yet doing that. Because honestly, we haven't used that spreader yet. But I did seed some clover with some spring wheat at the same time. The issue you have there, obviously, it really limits you on your herbicide applications. But so that goes back to those slides where I had all that prickly lettuce growing. That was that field where I had crimson clover seeded with the spring wheat, so we couldn't crop spray it that previous year, and therefore we did have a few weeds. It wasn't even that bad, but like I say, that was a blessing to have them weeds out there. And another thing with these weeds, it's amazing how we'll get a flush of weeds one year, and once they run their course, we don't have a problem with them again after that. With the crop diversification we're getting, like, one year we'll have prickly lettuce, and then the next year we might have a mare's tail problem. And the following year, we won't have a prickly lettuce or a mare's tail problem. It's crazy how this soil, as it heals itself and you add crop diversity, you don't have continued weed problems. You know, where in the past we had continuous green foxtail problems, continuous wild oat problems, continuous thistle problems, and it's a lot of those weed issues are taking care of themselves.
That's excellent. I would call everyone's attention to the lower left on the screen, the logo Regen Earth Verified. We made the announcement today that the partners of Understanding Ag have started a regenerative verification program, and we named that Regen Earth. You can go to theregenearth.com and look up more about it. Our goal is to advance regenerative agriculture worldwide by verifying the crops and livestock that are raised in a regenerative manner in healthy soils. And we're working with a number of supply chains. It's our goal to be able to match up and help producers access these supply chains in order to increase their profitability. So we encourage you to look at that. And also remember, our next webinar will be on February 17th. Cover crops with cash crops, the good, the bad, and the ugly. With that, I want to thank Brandon for his time this evening. It's a wonderful story. We thank you, Brandon, and thank everyone on behalf of Understanding Ag and Soil Health Academy. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Brandon.